Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Circle Up and Get Real. This week, I have no guests. I was supposed to have a guest for today's podcast, and yeah, my schedule got messed up. So next week, we will have a guest, and you will want to be sure to tune in because it'll be a lot of fun. So today, I just wanted to fill in the space between last week's the last 2 weeks amazing interviews, and then next week's. So this week I've been thinking about what keeps showing up in my life and my awareness. And I find it really fascinating that some of the things that are most compelling to me as far as subjects or noticings uh, keep showing up. And the conversations I've been having in person and probably online too have had themes recently. And I know it's because it's things I'm thinking of and things that I bring up in the conversation I'm having with people, whether I do it on purpose or intentionally or not. So some of the topics, subject matters, have been really curious to me and interesting. And so somehow it seems I'm able to weave some of my noticings into some of these conversations, which seem to be random on the surface, but really have in common a lot of the themes I'm looking for. So I say all that in general terms to say that I bring my energy and I'll say the weather with me. I bring the weather with me into the conversations I'm having because of how I'm being or how I'm feeling or how I'm responding or reacting to the circumstances around me. Let's just use the weather since I said you can bring your weather with you. I live in a part of the country where we have long winters typically, and we have this thing called false spring where it can be really warm and then it'll snow and then really warm and it'll get cold. And we never quite know when spring is actually coming because in some cases we've had buds on the trees and we've had robins and the grass starts getting green and then it snows. So we have this weird phenomena where we never really know. And sometimes it can get easy to be cynical about weather when you live in that kind of environment. Oh, I think we even say, just wait around and the weather will change. That's what it's like living in the upper Midwest. And so we never get too excited for warm weather and we never get too thrown off by cold weather. Maybe that's a stretch. We kind of do. Because at this time of year, we're looking for warmth and then we don't always love it when it gets cold. So we tend to bring our cynicism, skepticism, resignation, whatever it is that we have in our mindset with us. We bring our weather with us. So whether or not the temperatures outside are warm or cold, we still bring who we are being with us to any meeting or gathering or interaction we have. And if we do that on purpose, I will speak for myself. I would bring spring weather. I would bring spring weather to me, to conversations I'm having, regardless of what the temperature is outside. I have the ability to bring something that I call spring weather, which is anticipation of something great, which is when the colors start to show up in the part of the world I live in, where, every day it can look one way, every day it changes because it can look one way one day and then the next day the leaves are out. And so there's this anticipation and this optimism, I think, that I will call spring weather. And I can bring that with me to any meeting I'm having. I can bring it to any interaction I'm having. And, more often than not, I experience something close to joy when I bring that kind of weather. So there's an anticipation. I wouldn't say an expectation necessarily, but an anticipation of something positive. And I've noticed in the last, I'll say 2 weeks, especially, in any meeting I've had with humans in person or virtually, there's been this thread of anticipation in a positive way. And I, I can't explain it necessarily, except to say if I were in a mentality of victim thinking, I would think what keeps happening to me in a negative way, or what keeps showing up in a negative way, because I would be looking for the Eeyore version of the weather, right? It's wah, wah, sad trombone, this is gonna turn out bad because it always does, because if I didn't have bad luck, I wouldn't have any luck at all. And all of those kinds of, I'll call that, should we call it winter weather? I don't want to judge the seasons because they're all necessary. But, the glass half empty mentality. Sometimes I think we do that because we'd rather not be disappointed. And so then we have no expectations of anything positive. I remember a quote I put in my very first book, the very first book I wrote in 2006, which was called The 100% Factor. And one of the quotes I used at the beginning of one of the chapters was, "Blessed are they who expect nothing, for they shall not be disappointed." And I remember when I first heard that quote, I thought, well, how depressing is that? But then I started thinking about it and I thought, well, whose expectations am I trying to live up to? Do I have an expectation of someone else that they need to be a certain way? And when I do that and I expect someone else to be a certain way, of course I'm going to be disappointed because that person didn't even get to be involved in the decision about how I expected them to show up. And maybe it's even myself, an expectation I have for myself. If I don't live up to it, then I beat myself up. So I started thinking about expectations in that light. And I thought, well, maybe there is some credence to that quote. Blessed are they who expect nothing, for they shall not be disappointed. They may not be as elated as they could be either. And so just considering what that question, what keeps showing up, is kind of interesting. If I believe that things turn out for me. Things happen for my greatest good. More times than not, that's what shows up. And in that mindset, you will find what you're looking for. And that's what shows up. And so I have been really fascinated by even a conversation we had today in one of my mastermind groups about feelings. What is the feeling you desire to have when you go to sleep at night? Is it a feeling of accomplishment? Is it a feeling of worthiness? Is it a feeling of appreciation? Because if we anticipate the feelings we truly desire, would we say we want to feel inadequate? We want to feel like we have regrets? I don't think we'd choose that if we were on purpose about how we want to feel at the end of the day. And I noticed that what has happened to me in my past is that, if you don't get your hopes up, you won't be disappointed. And so then at the end of the day, it might have been, well, at least I didn't mess that up today. Or, see, this always happens. There are a lot of ways to reflect. And if we're looking for ways we messed up, the funny thing is thinking about that, the way we messed up, that keeps showing up and it can become the dominant feeling we have. I am a screw up. Let's just see how I'm going to mess up tomorrow. And I remember back in my younger years, those things would plague me. The mistakes I made and the way I said something I shouldn't have said, or, the way I disappointed somebody, or I didn't fulfill on an expectation or something, or I don't know, mistakes. Let's just put it that way. I make mistakes. We all make mistakes. I used to dwell on the mistakes. And it's only occurred to me recently to think about that again in that light, because I made a mistake last week or the week before that for a moment I had that same feeling. And it's the feeling in my gut, that feeling of I disappointed someone. I did something I could have done better. And I remember that feeling. I had forgotten it because I haven't had it for a long time, but it came back. And then I had to examine that feeling. What was my intention when I said this thing I said? Was my intention to be a jerk? Was my intention to, I don't know, step on somebody's toes or do something? That was never my intention. Did I do that inadvertently? Maybe. Maybe I did. Should I apologize for that? Should I clean it up? Those were all the things that came to my mind. And before I could take any action on this thing that I did, I got an email from somebody who said, "Not, no worries, all good." And I thought, I don't know, I'm going to say 10 minutes, in the 10 minutes between when I said something in an email and I got a response in an email, I was making up that there was a lot of things wrong. I was stupid. I should have known better. What was I thinking? Oh my gosh, they're going to hate me. But in those 10 minutes, I made it mean so many things. And I got the email back that said, "Hey, no worries. We got it." I went, what was the point of those 10 minutes of worry about something that was never my intention and could have gone the other way? It could have been the result that I got, which was no worries. So I think about the world we live in and all of the catastrophizing we can do and all of the things where we have absolutely no control over most of the things we worry about, and how much time we spend in that negative space of I've gotta walk on eggshells, I've got to be careful, what if, and we do this whole what if in the catastrophizing way instead of what if in the positive way. And I wonder how often we do that without being aware of it because it's just become our identity. I have to be careful. I call it beware energy. Beware. I have to beware. And everywhere I go, something bad could happen. And if I'm in this space of beware, I'm really tight and I'm careful and I'm never the best version of me. And so I've, in my own mind, moved that from beware energy to be aware energy. And in be aware, I notice things so much more broadly than I ever would in beware energy. And while I can only control me, which is hard enough most of the time, I know my intentions. I know my true desires to connect with people, connection, communication, collaboration. Those are my desires. And in some cases, I may overstep. I may ask a question that's inappropriate. I may make an assumption that I don't check. There could be lots of ways I make a mistake in that way. And yet, more often than not, I'm glad I asked the question. More often than not, I'm glad I pursued more information. Because if at the end of the day I'm going to have any regrets, I'll say at the end of my life, if I'm going to have any regrets, may they be for things I did and not for things I wish I would have done. And so thinking, we were talking in an earlier mastermind group today about that. And that if one of your desires is to get into better physical condition and you're thinking to yourself, "Oh, I really should go to the gym," or "I really should go for a walk," and you decide not to, you will probably have more regrets than if you just did it. So I ask myself sometimes, even getting up in the morning, not anymore, but I'm a morning person now, but I used to not be a morning person. And to get out of bed in the morning, I would tell myself, am I going to have more regrets if I do get up now or if I don't? And that was always enough to get me up. So consider that for yourself. Will you have more regrets if you do take action on this or don't? Kara, thank you for that. Expect nothing, appreciate everything. That's so good because then there's no undue heaviness on other people or yourself. Those expectations can be disappointing. And you say, appreciate everything. I love that so much. Gratitude is the energy of appreciation, really. It's an attitude, right? And in my opinion, that's what the world could use a lot more of. Gratitude and appreciation for our relationships, for even the situations we don't love. Could we learn something from them? Could there be an opportunity in the moment to make a choice that at least puts us on a path toward what we do want? I'm really sensitive to privilege that I have that others may not have. The choices I have may be greater than the choices others have. And yet, in the space of choice, even one teeny tiny little thing, could we choose toward what we do want instead of away from what we don't want? And in that tiny little choice, moving toward what we do want, I believe we get a little tiny bit stronger. So that one little step I took toward what I do want, instead of always falling into the trap of wanting to be right about how bad things are. I wonder if that could give us just some level of confidence that we didn't have when we allowed gravity to pull us back. And then over time, those baby steps will get us in a different direction if we just take enough of them. And so you can pick whatever context you want to try this out. And I notice that sometimes people are stuck below the line, and below the line is unconscious behavior. It's being closed, defensive, and committed to being right. When we're stuck in unconscious behavior, we're unconscious. We don't even know. It's become what we do over time. And then we learn that what we do over time when we are below the line allows us to be right about how bad things are. And if we want to be right, I guess I'd prefer to be right about something that brings me out of that funk. And so then above the line is open, curious, and committed to learning. And in that space, to me, that's the spring attitude that I want to bring, the spring weather I want to bring. Again, I can't make these decisions or choices for anyone else. I have enough trouble making it for myself. But in our conversation earlier in the mastermind group, we said maybe even as a mentor, a parent, a coach, a teacher, a leader in some ways, we can want things for our people. We can want them to be happy and joyful and fulfilled, and we can want that for them. And yet we can't want it more for them than they want it for themselves. So we talked earlier today about maybe when people are in that space of heaviness, winter weather, they can borrow my belief in them, borrow some of my belief in you, borrow some of my spring weather attitude until you've developed it for yourself. Because in that space of putting that one foot in front of another when things feel really heavy, just remember that there are people out there like Kara, like me, who will allow you to please use our energy, use our faith in you till you've developed it in yourself. I know, Kara, I speak for you because I know you really well, and I think that is how you've lived your whole life in your leadership roles as a parent, as a friend, as a worker. Um, this is how we each can make our world just a tiny little bit better than it was the day before. We have that opportunity, we have that ability, I think. Again, that's another question. Ability and willingness. You know, in some cases, is it I have no ability? I have no ability to see it different than it is? I would ask, is that true? Do you not have the ability? Because if you have the willingness, the ability will show up. I really believe willingness has to come first. So if you're willing to just see one teeny tiny little step in a different direction, and over time you keep going in that direction, I can't guarantee it for anyone else, but I can tell you how it works for me. And that'll be a whole other story at some point. Fix in your mind what you truly desire, and then notice how the universe conspires on your behalf. Once you make a decision, the universe conspires on your behalf. That's an Emerson quote that was a theme in the book The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. Those kinds of aphorisms can seem just like theory and nice little things to say until you actually experience them. You know, if you really consider, everything's theory till it's not. Everything's theory till you do something and prove it right or wrong. And so if we're willing to look for evidence to prove that something is possible, we'll probably find it. If we're looking for evidence to prove that nothing is possible, we'll probably find that too. And I'd ask us, what is the weather each of us wants to bring to the conversations and the situations in our lives? Is it the winter where things are shutting down, which, by the way, is part of the process? And maybe we have to endure the winter so that we can experience the spring. And at some point, the outdoor weather has nothing to do with the indoor weather that I bring. It doesn't, and it doesn't have to. And if you're going to call me toxically positive about that, I guess that's your choice. And I will continue bringing spring weather with me. And I'm hopeful that those of us who want to do that together, we can actually add to what we are up to. Kara says, if you can't find hope by Abel Hart. Okay, if you can't find hope by Abel Hart. I'm guessing is that a book, Kara? I will put that in the show notes. There are a lot of resources if you're looking for them. And if you're really, really dedicated to having something be different than it is, again, it's one foot in front of the other over time. And if you do that with consistency, I'm just here to say, and we could give you many examples, that you'll get where you're headed over time, maybe not overnight, but anything worth doing is worth doing well. And so keep in mind the regrets. Will you have more regrets for things you didn't do or things you did do? Kara says it's a song. If you can't find hope by Abel Hart, it's a song. So let's look at that song. If you can't find hope by Abel Hart. I appreciate that, Kara. I'm so glad you stopped in, Kara. You are just one of my favorite people, and it's so much fun to interact with you here and in real life when we can. So everybody, maybe this week, as you're looking for ways to be real, pick one of the letters: radical, energized, authentic, learning focused, and bring some of that in the weather you bring to your next conversation with your kids, with your spouse, with your partners, with your friends, at work, at the gas station. See if there's a way you can impact someone in a toward direction, toward what you do want, instead of only away from what you don't want. Let's just see what happens. It's worth a try. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you again. Bye.